They bullied her on her first day, mocked her silence, reached for the bracelet on her wrist. But what those girls didn't know was that bracelet belonged to Captain Sarah Miller, a firefighter who ran into a burning warehouse on February 14, 2023, and never walked out. Emma Miller stood alone on that playground, surrounded by laughter and cruelty. But she wasn't alone. A German shepherd sat watching from across the yard. His name was Rex, and 6 months earlier, he had been there when Emma's mother made the choice that cost her everything. Now, Rex had made a choice too. He refused every handler, escaped his facility, ran back to Cedar Street again and again, searching for the one person who still carried his partner's scent, Emma. And when the school tried to take him away, when fire alarms rang again, when another life hung in the balance, Rex did what Sarah Miller had taught him. He ran toward the danger. This is the story of a mother's final mission, a dog's unbreakable loyalty, and a little girl who learned that courage doesn't end when a hero falls. It just finds a new heartbeat. Stay with us because this story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. On her very first morning at Redwood Creek Elementary, Emma Miller had no idea that by lunchtime, the entire school would learn the meaning of her silence. Bus F12 stopped at the front gates of Redwood Creek Elementary. Emma sat near the back, holding the straps of her faded purple backpack. Through the window, she saw the school building and the busy playground. Kids were already laughing and talking. Her chest felt tight, the same heavy feeling she had carried since her mother died. When the doors opened, Emma stepped down slowly while the other children rushed past her. She stood for a moment as the bus drove away. The noise around her felt loud and overwhelming. But she knew she had to move forward. She walked along the edge of the playground and stopped near the swings, trying not to stand out. Her fingers moved to the bracelet on her left wrist, a thin silver chain with a charm that read, "Braver Together." It had belonged to her mother. She wore it every day. Before she could settle, 3 girls stepped in front of her. The tallest one, with a tight ponytail, looked at her closely. Another girl with freckles crossed her arms. The third watched quietly. "You're new," the tall girl said. Emma nodded. "What's that?" the freckled girl asked, pointing at her bracelet. Emma pulled her hand back, but the tall girl had already noticed it. "Where'd you get it?" she asked. Emma tried to speak, but her throat felt dry. Her mind flashed to the hospital room, the machines, her mother's hand in hers, the doctors talking. The silence after. "She doesn't talk much," the freckled girl said. "Maybe she stole it." Emma shook her head quickly. "Let me see it," the tall girl said, reaching out. "Don't." Emma's voice broke. The girls laughed. Emma remembered her mother kneeling in uniform, saying, "Bravery isn't about being loud. It's about standing when it's hard." On February 14th, her mother had run back into a burning warehouse to save someone. She never came back out. Emma blinked and returned to the present. The girls were still there, but near the flagpole a German shepherd sat quietly, ears up, watching. The dog didn't bark, he didn't move. But in that stillness, everything changed. Emma's breathing, which had been fast and uneven, slowly began to calm. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way the dog stood there, steady and focused. His eyes were fixed on her. Not angry, just there. The tall girl noticed. "What are you looking at?" she asked. Emma didn't answer. She stepped back, creating distance from the girls. Before they could say more, a voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" Principal Davis walked toward them. The tall girl quickly changed her expression. "No, Mr. Davis. We were just talking." His eyes moved to Emma. "Emma Miller," she nodded. "Welcome to Redwood Creek Elementary. If you need anything, my office is open." The girls slowly walked away. Emma let out a shaky breath. Mr. Davis crouched slightly. "That bracelet is beautiful," he said. Emma held it tightly. Then he looked toward the dog near the flagpole. His face changed. "That's Rex," he said gently. "He was your mother's partner." Emma felt her chest tighten. She had known her mother's K9 survived the fire, but she never knew what happened after. Mr. Davis continued, "After the fire, Rex wouldn't work with anyone else. He kept running back to your street." Emma swallowed hard. Rex stood and walked toward her. He stopped in front of her and dropped something at her feet. Emma picked it up, a small metal tag blackened from fire. It read Captain Sarah Miller. She turned it over. Saved by Sarah Miller, February 14, 2023. Behind her, the tall girl gasped. "That's my dad's name," she whispered. "He was trapped in that fire. A firefighter carried him out. He never knew her name." Tears filled her eyes. "Your mom saved him." Emma stood quietly, holding the tag. Rex sat beside her, pressing gently against her leg. Mr. Davis spoke softly. "Rex has been coming here every morning for 3 weeks. Now we know why." Emma knelt and hugged him. For the first time since the fire, she didn't feel invisible. Her mother's courage was still alive. February 14, 2023 started like a normal Tuesday. Emma woke up to pancakes. Her mother, Captain Sarah Miller, was already in her Navy uniform, badge on her chest. She moved around the kitchen making breakfast, while Rex waited near the door. Emma sat at the table watching her. "Big day?" Emma asked. "Just another shift," Sarah replied with a smile. "But every shift matters." She kissed Emma's forehead and left with Rex beside her. That was the last normal moment. Around 3 in the afternoon, an emergency call came in: a warehouse fire on the east side of town. Heavy smoke. Possible collapse, workers trapped inside. Sarah's team was first to arrive. Emma didn't know the details until later. What she remembered was the phone ringing, her father's face turning pale, the drive toward the smoke rising in the distance. When they reached the scene, fire trucks filled the street. Firefighters moved quickly, shouting instructions. Emma stood behind the barrier with her father, searching for her mother. Then someone yelled, "Captain Miller's going back in." Emma froze. Her father whispered, "No." But Sarah was already moving, helmet on, axe in hand, Rex at her side. Emma watched her disappear into the building. They waited. Minutes felt endless. Then the building made a deep cracking sound. The central beam failed. The roof collapsed. People screamed. Firefighters rushed forward. Emma's father dropped to his knees, pulling her close. When the smoke cleared, they found a man alive but unconscious. And near him, under debris, Captain Sarah Miller. Rex had dragged the man toward the exit. Sarah had stayed behind to clear the path. She didn't come out. At the hospital, machines kept her alive for 3 days. Emma held her mother's hand and talked to her, but Sarah never opened her eyes. The machines were turned off. The funeral was large. Firefighters, officials, families. Sarah had helped. Emma sat in the front row, staring at the folded flag on the coffin. Rex stayed beside her, his head resting on her lap. Now 6 months later, standing in the school playground with the soot-stained tag in her hand, Emma understood something. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting even when you were afraid. Her mother ran into the fire because someone needed help. And through Rex, through the life she saved, Captain Sarah Miller was still making a difference. Even in loss, she was still a hero. Just when Emma thought she might lose him too, Rex ran, not away, but toward another life in danger. After the playground moment, things changed at Redwood Creek Elementary. Students still whispered, but now it was curiosity, not cruelty. Lily sat with Emma at lunch, quiet and thoughtful. Rex stayed on campus, lying near the flagpole at recess and following Emma from a distance. Teachers allowed it. His vest read, "In memory of Captain Sarah Miller," but not everyone agreed. One afternoon, Emma walked past Principal Davis's office and heard raised voices inside. "It's a liability," said Mrs. Carlton, the district superintendent. "A trained K-9 on school grounds. What if something happens? Rex has an excellent record." Mr. Davis replied, "He's helping a child who lost her mother." "The dog needs to be rehomed," Mrs. Carlton said firmly. "The transfer paperwork will be filed by Friday." Emma froze. Rehomed. She ran outside and found Rex under the oak tree. She hugged him tightly. "They're going to take you," she whispered. "I can't lose you two." That night, she couldn't sleep. She heard her father downstairs arguing on the phone, trying to fight the decision. The next morning felt tense. Emma walked to the flagpole, but Rex wasn't there. Then she heard shouting near the entrance. A crowd had formed. Principal Davis's elderly father lay on the pavement, clutching his chest. His breathing was shallow. "Call 911, someone yelled. People panicked. Then Rex appeared, running fast across the lot. He pushed through the crowd and barked once, sharp and loud. Everyone stopped. Rex sniffed the man's jacket and pocket, then pulled out a small orange pill bottle. It rolled onto the ground, nitroglycerin. A teacher grabbed it and placed a tablet under the man's tongue. Within moments, his breathing improved. Sirens approached, but the emergency had already been handled. Rex sat beside the man calmly. Emma stood at the edge of the crowd, crying. Principal Davis knelt beside his father, then looked at Rex. "You saved him," he said quietly. The transfer paperwork was never filed. That afternoon, Emma walked home with Rex beside her. He wasn't just her mother's partner. He was still saving lives. And Emma knew courage hadn't ended with her mother. It was still here. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their ambulance pulling up to the school entrance with lights flashing but no siren, a sign that the immediate danger had passed. 2 EMs hurried forward with a stretcher and equipment, their movements practiced and efficient. Mr. Davis's father, still pale but breathing steadily, was carefully lifted onto the stretcher, an oxygen mask placed gently over his face. The small crowd of students and teachers that had gathered watched in hushed silence, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like a heavy blanket. Emma stood at the edge of the circle, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes fixed on Rex. He hadn't moved from his spot beside the elderly man, his dark eyes tracking every movement the paramedics made, as if he were still on duty, still responsible. One of the EMTs, a woman with kind eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair, knelt beside Rex and ran a hand over his head. "Good boy," she murmured. "You did real good." She looked up at Mr. Davis, who stood beside the stretcher, gripping his father's hand. "If that dog hadn't found the nitro when he did, we'd be looking at a very different outcome. He bought us the time we needed." Mr. Davis nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes glistening. "I know," he said quietly. "I know." As the ambulance pulled away, the crowd began to disperse, students murmuring amongst themselves, teachers ushering them back toward the building. But Emma couldn't move. She felt rooted to the pavement, her heart still racing, her mind replaying the moment Rex had bolted across the lot, instinct taking over, training kicking in, courage rising to meet the need. Mr. Davis approached her slowly, his face drawn but filled with something deeper than gratitude. He crouched down to her level, his voice soft. "Emma, I need you to know something. When the district tried to take Rex away, I fought as hard as I could, but I was losing. The rules, the policies, they didn't care about what was right. They only cared about what was easy." He paused, his gaze shifting to Rex, who had finally stood and moved to Emma's side, pressing his shoulder against her leg. "But after today, after what he just did, there's no argument left. Rex isn't just a dog, he's a hero. And he belongs here, with you." Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to say something, to thank him, to tell him what it meant to hear those words. But all she could manage was a small nod, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. That afternoon, Fire Chief Tom Harris arrived at Redwood Creek Elementary unannounced. He was a broad, shouldered man with gray hair cropped short and a face weathered by years of service. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had seen too much but still chose to show up. Mr. Davis met him in the main office, and Emma, who had been sitting quietly in the counselor's waiting area, could hear their voices through the open door. "I heard what happened," Chief Harris said, "and I need to tell you something about Rex." He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "After Sarah died, we tried everything to get him to work with another handler. We rotated him through 5 different officers, top-tier professionals. But he refused, wouldn't follow commands, wouldn't engage. He just shut down." Emma leaned forward, listening intently, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. "We thought it was trauma," Harris continued, "and maybe it was. But then he started running. 3 times in 2 weeks he escaped the K-9 facility and ran, always in the same direction, always back to Cedar Street, to Sarah's house, to Emma." Emma's breath caught. She hadn't known. Her father had mentioned seeing Rex once, sitting at the end of their driveway in the early morning, but she'd thought it was coincidence. Why finally realized, Harris said, his voice thick with emotion, that Rex hadn't lost his purpose. He just shifted it. His mission wasn't over. It had just changed hands. There was a long pause. Then Mr. Davis spoke. "So what happens now?" "Now." Harris let out a slow breath. "No, we make it official. Rex is retired from active duty. He's being reassigned permanently to Emma Miller. He'll be registered as a therapy animal, with full clearance to accompany her on campus. No more bureaucratic runaround, no more threats of removal. He stays." Emma felt the tears spill over, Hot and unstoppable, relief and grief tangled together in a knot she couldn't untee. She stood and walked to the doorway, her small frame appearing in the threshold. Both men turned to look at her. Chief Harris's stern expression softened. He knelt down, meeting her eyes. "Your mother was the best officer I ever worked with, and Rex was the best partner she could have asked for. Now he's yours. Take care of him, and he'll take care of you. That's the deal." Emma nodded, her voice finally finding its way out. "I will." That evening, as Emma walked home with Rex beside her, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the sidewalk, she felt something shift inside her. Not healing, not yet, but hope. The kind that doesn't arrive with fanfare, but quietly, like the first green shoots after a long winter. Her mother had taught her that bravery wasn't loud. It was steady. It was showing up even when the world felt too heavy to carry. And now, through Rex, that lesson lived on. When they reached the small blue house on Cedar Street, her father was waiting on the porch, his arms crossed, his eyes red, rimmed but smiling. Emma climbed the steps and stood beside him, Rex sitting calmly at her feet. Her father rested a hand on her shoulder. "Your mom would be proud," he said quietly. Emma looked down at Rex, at the scars on his muzzle, the silver threading through his coat, the steady, unwavering gaze that had saved lives twice over. "I know," she whispered. And for the first time in 6 months, she believed it. It started as an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Emma sat in Ms. Harmon's 5th grade classroom, her pencil moving slowly across a math worksheet, her mind half elsewhere. Rex lay beneath her desk, his breathing a steady rhythm she had come to rely on. Outside the window, clouds drifted lazily across a pale blue sky. The fluorescent lights hummed. Someone coughed. A pencil dropped. Everything felt safe. Normal. Then the fire alarm shrieked to life. The sound was piercing, relentless, a sharp metallic wail that cut through the quiet like a blade. Emma's body went rigid. Her pencil clattered to the floor. Her vision narrowed, the edges of the room dimming as her pulse roared in her ears. Around her, students stood quickly, chairs scraping, voices rising in confusion and mild excitement. Fire drills were routine, almost boring. But Emma couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. The sound dragged her back 6 months, to the warehouse, to the smoke, to the moment her mother disappeared into the flames. Ms. Harmon's voice cut through the noise. "Everyone, line up at the door, quickly and quietly. This is not a drill." The last 4 words sent a ripple of fear through the classroom. Not a drill. Real smoke. Real danger. Students hurried toward the exit, jostling and murmuring. But Emma remained frozen in her seat, her hands gripping the edge of the desk, so tightly her knuckles turned white. Rex stood immediately, pressing his nose against her arm, whining softly. Ms. Harmon noticed and rushed over, crouching beside Emma's desk. "Emma, sweetheart, we have to go. Now." But Emma couldn't make her legs work. The alarm screamed on, and somewhere in the building, she smelled its smoke, faint but unmistakable, creeping through the vents. Ms. Harmon gently took Emma's hand, her voice firm but kind. "I've got you. Rex has got you. We're going together." With trembling legs, Emma stood. Ms. Harmon guided her toward the door, Rex flanking her other side, his body a solid, reassuring presence. The hallway was chaos. Students poured from classrooms, teachers shouting instructions, the alarm drowning out almost everything. Smoke detectors blinked red along the ceiling. A thin haze drifted near the science wing, gray and curling, growing thicker with every passing second. The evacuation route led outside, across the main hallway, through the double doors to the field. Emma moved with the crowd, her hand still gripping Ms. Harmon's, her heart hammering. But as they neared the exit, a voice cut through the noise. "Wait! Lily's not here!" Emma's head whipped around. One of Lily's friends stood near the stairwell, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. She went to the bathroom before the alarm. "I don't see her." Ms. Harmon's face went white. She glanced toward the science wing, where the smoke was thickest, then back at the exit. Protocol demanded she get her students out. But Lily, Rex barked, once sharp and commanding. Emma looked down at him. His ears were forward, his body tense, his gaze locked on the hallway leading toward the bathrooms. He knew. Without waiting for permission, Rex bolted. Emma's heart lurched. Rex, no! But he was already gone, disappearing into the smoke-filled corridor, his dark shape swallowed by the haze. Harmon shouted into her radio. "We have a student unaccounted for, 2nd floor, near the science wing." Static crackled back, voices overlapping, confusion spreading. Emma stood at the threshold of the exit, her body torn between the safety of the field and the hallway where Rex had vanished. Around her, students poured outside, teachers counting heads, voices rising in controlled panic. But all Emma could think about was the dog who had already lost one person he loved. She couldn't lose him too. She turned back toward the smoke. Miss Harmon grabbed her arm. "Emma, no. The fire department is on the way." But Emma pulled free, her voice breaking. "He's going to find her, I know he is." Tears streamed down her face, hot and unstoppable. "Please, please don't let them take him away from me again." Miss Harmon's grip loosened, her own eyes glistening. She pulled Emma into a tight hug, holding her as the alarm wailed and the smoke thickened and the seconds stretched into unbearable eternities. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Paramedics. But inside, in the haze and heat, a German shepherd moved through the halls with the same courage his partner had once carried into burning buildings. And somewhere in that smoke, a girl waited to be found. Emma stood at the edge of the field, her chest heaving, her hands clenched into fists. She stared at the double doors, at the smoke curling out from the cracks, at the empty space where Rex had disappeared. Her voice came out as a whisper, broken and desperate. "Please don't take him too?" At 1:49 p.m., the doorway filled with smoke, and then a miracle walked out of it. The field had gone silent. 200 students and staff stood in scattered clusters, eyes locked on the main entrance of Redwood Creek Elementary. Teachers clutched their roster sheets, radios crackling with tense, clipped updates. The fire trucks had arrived, sirens winding down into an eerie quiet. Firefighters pulling hoses from the trucks with practiced efficiency. Smoke poured from the second-floor windows, gray and thick, but no flames were visible yet. "The science wing," someone said. "Electrical fire." Contained but spreading. Emma stood at the front of the crowd, her whole body trembling. Harmon's hand resting on her shoulder. She couldn't blink. Couldn't breathe. Every second that passed felt like an hour, and the doorway remained empty, filled only with smoke and shadows. Her father had been called. He was on his way. But Emma didn't care about that. She cared about the dog who had run into danger without hesitation, just like her mother. She cared about Lily, who had once mocked her but had since become something close to a friend. She cared about the unbearable weight pressing down on her chest, the fear that history was about to repeat itself. Then, through the haze, movement. A shape, low to the ground, steady. Rex emerged from the smoke first, his coat streaked with soot, his breathing heavy but controlled. And behind him, stumbling slightly, coughing into her sleeve, was Lily. The field erupted. Gasps, shouts, a few people crying out in relief. 2 paramedics rushed forward with a stretcher and oxygen masks, but Lily waved them off, her legs shaky but holding. Her face was smudged with ash, her eyes red and watering, but she was alive. Rex walked beside her, his body pressed gently against her leg, guiding her forward with the same calm authority he had once used in the line of duty. When Lily reached the edge of the crowd, she collapsed to her knees, coughing hard, gulping in clean air. A paramedic knelt beside her, checking her pulse, her breathing, her oxygen levels. "She's okay," he called over his shoulder. "Minor smoke inhalation. She'll be fine." Lily looked up, her gaze searching the crowd until it landed on Emma. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lily's face crumpled, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she choked out, her voice raw. "I'm so sorry." Emma didn't think. She just ran. She crossed the grass in seconds and dropped to her knees in front of Lily, wrapping her arms around her in a fierce, trembling hug. Lily clung to her, sobbing into her shoulder, her whole body shaking. "I didn't know," Lily whispered. "I didn't know what it felt like to be that scared. To think you're not going to make it. And then I heard him. I heard Rex barking, and I followed the sound, and he led me out." She pulled back, looking Emma in the eyes. "Your mom saved my dad. And today her dog saved me." Emma's tears fell silently, her chest too full to speak. Rex sat beside them, his tail wagging slowly, his dark eyes soft and steady. Ms. Harmon approached quietly, crouching beside the 2 girls. "Bravery isn't loud," she said gently, her voice thick with emotion. "It's steady. It's choosing to show up even when you're afraid." She looked at Emma. "Your mother taught you that. And now Rex is teaching all of us." The firefighters declared the building safe an hour later. The fire had been contained to a single storage room in the science wing, extinguished before it could spread. No one had been seriously hurt. But the story of the dog who ran into the smoke, who found a frightened girl and guided her to safety, spread through the town like wildfire. By that evening, news crews had arrived. By the next morning, Rex's photo was on the front page of the local paper beneath the headline, "Arrow's Legacy Lives On." Emma sat on her front porch that night, Rex's head resting in her lap, the stars bright and clear above them. Her father sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them quiet, both of them grateful. She'd be proud of him, her father said softly. Emma nodded, running her fingers through Rex's fur. She'd be proud of both of us. And in that moment, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the evening, crickets chirping, a breeze rustling the leaves, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not because the grief was gone, but because she finally understood that love doesn't end with loss. It transforms, it carries forward, and sometimes it saves lives. 3 days after the rescue, Emma sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room of Riverside Veterinary Hospital, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her father beside her. The room smelled like antiseptic and lavender air freshener, a combination that did nothing to calm the knot in her stomach. Rex was in surgery. The smoke inhalation had been worse than it first appeared. His lungs had taken damage, inflammation setting in overnight, his breathing becoming labored and painful. The vet, Dr. Nguyen, had explained it all in careful, measured terms, but Emma had only heard fragments: pulmonary edema, oxygen therapy, possible complications. The word that stuck was possible, because possible meant uncertain, and uncertain meant she might lose him. Her father reached over and squeezed her hand. "He's strong, Em. He's been through worse." But Emma wasn't sure that was true. Rex had survived the fire that took her mother, but he had been younger then, faster, less scarred. Now he was older, tired, carrying the weight of too many rescues, too many battles. The waiting room television played the local news on mute, closed captions scrolling across the bottom. Emma glanced up and saw her own face on the screen, a photo taken at school, Rex sitting beside her. The headline read, "Local hero dog undergoes emergency surgery after school rescue." Her stomach twisted. She looked away. Across the room, a woman with a small dog in her lap watched the screen, then looked over at Emma with recognition. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but Emma's father gave a small shake of his head, and the woman nodded, respecting the silence. Time moved strangely in waiting rooms. Minutes stretched and collapsed, folding in on themselves. Emma counted ceiling tiles, watched the second hand on the wall clock, listened to the murmur of voices from the front desk, the distant bark of a dog somewhere in the back. At one point the door opened, and Fire Chief Harris walked in, still in uniform, his face lined with concern. He nodded to Emma's father, then took a seat across from them. "Heard about Rex," he said quietly. "Wanted to be here." Emma looked at him. This man who had known her mother, who had trained with Rex, who had seen them both at their best. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her voice small. Harris's jaw tightened. "If anyone can pull through, it's him. That dog has more heart than most people I know." He paused, his gaze distant. "Your mother used to say that courage isn't about being unbreakable. It's about getting back up even when you're shattered." Emma's eyes stung, but she didn't look away. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," Harris said, "but fear means you care, and caring is what makes you brave." Another hour passed. Then 2. Emma dozed fitfully, her head resting on her father's shoulder, her dreams a tangled mess of smoke and sirens, and her mother's voice calling her name. When she woke, Dr. Nguyen was standing in front of them, her scrubs wrinkled, her face tired but calm. Emma's heart lurched. Her father stood quickly, his hand gripping Emma's shoulder. "How is he?" Dr. Nguyen smiled, and Emma's breath rushed out in a sob of relief. "He's stable. The surgery went well. We cleared the fluid from his lungs and placed him on oxygen support. He'll need to stay here for a few days, but he's going to recover." Emma's legs went weak. She sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face, tears streaming through her fingers. Her father knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms, his own eyes wet. "He's okay, Em. He's okay." Dr. Nguyen crouched down, her voice gentle. "He's not awake yet, but you can see him if you'd like. Just for a few minutes." Emma nodded frantically, wiping her face with the back of her hand. They followed Dr. Nagayan through a set of double doors into the recovery ward, a quiet room lined with kennels. At the far end, Rex lay on a soft blanket, an oxygen tube running beneath his nose, his breathing slow and even. Emma approached slowly, her footsteps soft on the linoleum. She knelt beside the kennel, pressing her palm against the wire door. "Hey Rex," she whispered. His ear twitched, just barely. But it was enough. Emma's tears fell again, but this time they were different. Not tears of fear, but of gratitude, of love. Her father rested a hand on her shoulder. Chief Harris stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. And in that small, quiet room, surrounded by the steady beep of monitors and the soft rise and fall of Rex's chest, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The kind that doesn't come from certainty, but from knowing that even in the darkest moments, even when the world feels like it's falling apart, there are beings, human and otherwise, who will fight to stay, who will refuse to give up, who will choose, again and again, to be brave. And that, Emma realized, was her mother's greatest gift. Not fearlessness, but the courage to keep going, even when the outcome was uncertain. Rex stirred slightly, his paws twitching in sleep, and Emma smiled through her tears. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." 6 weeks later, Redwood Creek Elementary looked different. Not in the buildings or the playground, but in the way it felt. There was a softness to the air now, a sense of collective breath held and finally released. The science wing had been repaired, the smoke damage erased, but the memory of what had happened there lingered in a way that wasn't frightening, it was reverent. On a bright Saturday morning in early November, the entire school community gathered on the lawn near the flagpole. Parents, students, teachers, local firefighters, and even a few reporters lined the grass in a loose semicircle. At the center stood a young oak tree, its branches still thin and hopeful, planted in rich dark soil. Beside it, a bronze plaque had been mounted on a low stone base, its surface gleaming in the sunlight. Emma stood near the front, her father beside her, Rex sitting calmly at her feet. He had fully recovered, his breathing strong, his energy restored. The vet had called it remarkable. Emma called it stubborn. Principal Davis stepped forward, holding a microphone, his voice steady and clear. "Today, we dedicate this tree and this garden in memory of Captain Sarah Miller, a woman who gave her life to save others, and in honor of Rex, her loyal partner, who has continued her legacy with the same courage and heart." The crowd applauded, a wave of sound that rolled gently across the field. Emma's throat tightened. Her father squeezed her hand. "Miss Oak," Mr. Davis continued, "will grow here for generations. It will provide shade and shelter, just as Captain Miller provided safety and hope. And around it, we will plant a courage garden, flowers, shrubs, and benches where students can sit, reflect, and remember that bravery comes in many forms." He gestured toward a small table where ribbons had been laid out, each one red, the color of firehouses and courage. "Why invite everyone to tie a ribbon to the tree today? Each one represents a promise to be kind, to be brave, to show up for each other." For a moment, no one moved. Then Lily stepped forward. She had been quiet in recent weeks, more thoughtful, less quick to laugh at others. She took a ribbon from the table, her hands shaking slightly, and approached the tree. She tied the ribbon carefully to a low branch, her fingers lingering on the fabric. Then she turned to Emma, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said simply. Emma nodded, unable to speak. One by one, others followed. Teachers, students, parents. Each person tied a ribbon, some whispering words, some standing in silence. The tree filled with color, red ribbons fluttering like small flames in the breeze. Fire Chief Harris stepped forward and placed a hand on the tree's trunk, his head bowed. Then he turned to Emma. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said quietly. "Not just for surviving, but for showing all of us what it means to carry her light forward." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm just trying not to forget." Harris shook his head. "You're not just remembering, Emma. You're honoring. There's a difference." As the ceremony wound down, Emma walked to the table and picked up the last ribbon. She approached the tree slowly, Rex following close behind. She tied the ribbon with care, her fingers tracing the smooth fabric, and then she pressed her palm against the bark, feeling the rough texture beneath her hand. "I miss you," she whispered, "every single day. But I'm okay. We're okay. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, and for just a moment it felt like an answer. That evening, as the sun set over Redwood Creek Elementary, the Courage Garden glowed in the golden light. Families lingered, children ran through the grass, and the red ribbons danced in the breeze. Emma sat on one of the new benches, Rex's head resting on her lap, her father beside her. "What do you think she'd say if she could see this?" Emma asked. Her father smiled, his eyes distant. "She'd probably tell us to stop making such a fuss." Emma laughed, a real laugh, one that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Yeah, she would." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep indigo, and as the first stars appeared, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Contentment. The kind that comes from knowing that even though the worst has happened, even though the world has cracked open and left scars, there is still beauty. Still love, still hope. Rex shifted beside her, his tail thumping softly against the bench. Emma smiled and scratched behind his ears. "You're a good boy," she whispered. "The best boy." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the evening and the glow of a garden built from grief and gratitude, Emma understood her mother's final lesson. Courage doesn't end when a life does. It multiplies, it spreads, and it grows quietly, steadily, like an oak tree reaching toward the sky. Spring arrived slowly at the house on Cedar Street. The snow melted in uneven patches, revealing brown grass and forgotten toys. Birds returned, their songs filling the early mornings with sound. The world, which had felt frozen and silent for so long, began to thaw. Emma sat on the front porch steps, her legs stretched out, her back against the wooden railing. Rex lay beside her, his head resting on her knee, his breathing slow and even. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't thinking about the past. She was simply present. Inside, her father moved through the house, humming softly. He had started doing that again recently, humming while he made coffee or folded laundry. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but Emma heard it, and it made her smile. On the wall in the hallway, two items hung side by side. Her mother's firefighter helmet, polished and gleaming, rested on a small wooden shelf. Beside it, framed behind glass, was the Medal of Valor Sarah had been awarded posthumously. Below that, a photographed Sarah in full uniform, Rex sitting proudly at her side, both of them looking straight at the camera with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Emma's father stepped onto the porch, a glass of lemonade in each hand. He handed one to Emma and sat beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "Good day?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Good day." They sat in companionable silence, sipping their drinks, watching the neighborhood slowly come to life. A kid rode by on a bike. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere, a lawnmower hummed. Rex's ear twitched at the sound, but he didn't move. He was content. "I got a call from Principal Davis today," her father said after a while. "They want to make the Courage Garden a permanent fixture, maybe even expand it. Turn it into a community space." Emma turned to look at him. "Really?" He nodded. "They're talking about adding benches, a little walking path, maybe even a memorial wall where people can leave messages." He said it's become a place where kids go when they need to feel safe. Emma's chest tightened, but not with sadness, with something warmer, pride maybe, or gratitude. "Mom would like that?" she said softly. She would, her father agreed. They fell silent again, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was full of memory and meaning and the quiet understanding that grief doesn't disappear, it just learns to coexist with joy. Rex shifted, rolling onto his back, his paws in the air, tongue lolling out in a goofy grin. Emma laughed and rubbed his belly, and he wiggled happily, his tail thumping against the porch. "You're such a goofball," she murmured. Her father chuckled. "He's earned it." Emma looked down at Rex. This dog who had lost his partner, who had refused to give up, who had found his way back to her against all odds. He had saved lives, he had carried her mother's courage forward, and now he was simply a dog again, content to lie in the sun, belly up, trusting and loved. She was right, Emma said quietly. Her father glanced at her. "About what?" "Bravery," Emma said. She used to say it wasn't about being loud or fearless. It was about showing up, about standing when it's hard. Her father's eyes softened. She was right. Emma nodded, her gaze distant. For a long time, I thought bravery meant doing big things, running into fires, saving people. But it's not just that, is it? Her father shook his head. No. Sometimes bravery is getting out of bed when you don't want to. Going to school when you're scared. Letting yourself care about something even when you know it might hurt. Emma looked down at Rex, who had rolled back onto his side, his eyes half closed, his breathing steady. And sometimes, she said softly, bravery is just staying, even when you've lost everything, even when it's easier to leave. Her father reached over and squeezed her hand. Yeah, he said, his voice thick. Sometimes it's that. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. The air cooled slightly, carrying the scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers. Emma leaned her head against her father's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. The warmth of Rex pressed against her leg. Emma whispered, "Every day."
"Me too,"
her father said, "but she's still here, in the garden. In Rex, in you." Emma closed her eyes, letting the words settle over her like a blanket. Her mother's story hadn't ended in the fire. It had continued. In the dog who refused to give up. In the garden that grew from grief. In the daughter who learned that courage wasn't something you found once and kept forever. It was something you chose, again and again, every single day. Rex sighed deeply, his body relaxing completely, and Emma smiled. "Some heroes leave," she murmured. "But some heroes stay." Her father kissed the top of her head. "And some heroes lie quietly at your feet in the afternoon sun." They sat there until the stars came out, the three of them together, no longer broken, but healing. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, Emma felt something she hadn't felt since the fire. Whole, not because the grief was gone, but because she had learned to carry it. Because she had learned that love doesn't end with loss. It transforms, it endures. And sometimes it saves you.